ICPD 30, enhancing rights-based national determinant contributions and integration of gender transformative approaches. My name is Julita Onobanjo, and I'm UNFPA's Global Director for our technical work based in New York. I think UNFPA is beyond thrilled to convene with partners at what is a monumental point in time for health, actually, and with that for sexual and reproductive health at COP. So indeed, the first ever Health Day, we are proud to be part of a side event that speaks to not only sexual and reproductive health and gender equality, but also to the ICPD program of action and how far we've come. We really are excited. We're excited to have you all here because I know that to be here means ICPD means something to you. And so I really want to just give you a round of applause, if you don't mind. I think over the last 3 months, there have been 5 specific regional conferences that have been held to review the progress of the ICPD program of action in the context of regional population and development agendas. So it's the Addis Ababa Declaration on Population and Development, the Montevideo Agenda and Consensus as well, but all regions have had an opportunity this year to look at how far they've come. And this is in the lead up to next year's 57th session of the Commission on Population and Development and the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the ICPD Program of Action. I think in all these regions, what has been constant has been that 30 years ago, while the ICPD agenda included very much issues of environment and the planet and the health of the planet as part of the population and development discourse. Indeed, 30 years on, I think the rollback and the holdback of progress on the implementation and the attainment of ICPD, and indeed the Sustainable Development Goals, has actually been hampered in some way or the other by climate crisis. ICPD in 1994 was revolutionary for its time in many ways. Fundamentally, in changing the discourse on population and demography from one, and we say, of numbers, to really one that puts at the heart the rights and choices of individuals, their rights to make decisions about their fertility, to make decisions about their body and their autonomy, to make decisions around their health, and to really use that as center to the population and development agenda. The principles of the 1994 Cairo Agenda remain relevant for us because indeed rights and choices must remain relevant and center to how we take forward climate action and its interlinkages with health and other aspects of our humanity. I think what is clear to us is urgency. And if there's anything I want to leave and start this session off with, is the fact that, it's 30 years, 1994, since Cairo. We cannot allow even one day to go by without the urgency that we raise in terms of the alarm with which climate crisis is impacting women's sexual and reproductive health and rights. The adverse effects of climate, you will hear, continues to intensify even with the 7 years that we have left to reach the SDGs. And indeed, in this decade of action, of acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals, the work we do on climate and its interchange and its intersection will become key. The World Meteorological Organization has reported that July 2023 stands as the hottest month ever recorded in human history. And no words, I think, more pertinently encapsulate the urgency with which we're looking at than our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, when he says the era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived. The air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable, and it is impacting on women and girls. It is impacting on their abilities to have fruitful and fulfilled sexual and reproductive health in lives, the outcomes that they have during pregnancy, and indeed the panel will expand on this. UNFPA firmly believes that even for the ICPD 30 years on, and for the Sustainable Development Goals, unless we look at the intersect between sexual and reproductive health and gender equality, and the issues of inclusion and equity, we will not only attain the promises of Cairo, but those of the SDGs, and as we move forward. So it's in that spirit that we really come and say thank you for being here and collaborating with us as we move forward. UNFPA has done significant work in terms of moving this agenda forward, and I hope that at some point we will be able to share much more of that. I wanted to be brief here because really this is just to welcome you. But indeed, we have our expertise in the room who will speak to what we've been able to achieve, both in terms of looking at vulnerability assessments and the importance of data, research, and evidence to inform policies, as we've looked at resilient health systems and specifically sexual and reproductive health systems, as we build the capacity of frontline health workers to respond and adapt to climate within the work we do, as we've looked at issues of young people, and indeed we want to give a shout out to all the young people here who've really worked hard to really get their voices into the COP28 discussion. Again, a first time for them as well, that they present a youth statement that again looks at issues of security, peace, gender, but what is really important for young people in this discussion. And really, with that, I just wanted to again appreciate our partners, WHO, for whom we work with a lot on the issues of health resilient systems, whether it's commodities, whether it is training of midwives and frontline workers, whether it is looking at ventilation within the labor wards to ensure that heat stress doesn't lead to outcomes that are poor for women. To IDRC, who continuously supports the work that we do and the work particularly with young people, to the Office of the High Commission on Human Rights, who we've joined with here, to our governments, because indeed they have taken on this, and those that are here will speak to how well they've integrated these issues within their national determinant contributions and adaptation plans, and beyond the integration to what they have financed to get this work done and that they have implemented to take it forward. And with that, I really then want to just appreciate on behalf of all the UNFPA colleagues here that have worked really hard to come together to pull off this side event, and to distinguishedly hand over to our amazing moderator and a partner who indeed, as we looked at national determinant contributions, Women Deliver looked at health sector plans and said, how well are they incorporating indeed climate action? So all sectors need to be mobilized. And so for the ministers of health that are here, I'm glad they're here with all other ministers, whether it's environment, social protection, youth, because indeed this agenda and the agenda of ICPD remains a multi-sectoral agenda that needs us all to come together. So with that, I will warmly welcome you, and I hand over to you, Maliha. Thank you for this.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alita, for for pulling this together, for your opening remarks, and for taking on this really, really important topic of how do we make sure that sexual reproductive health and rights, particularly from a human rights approach, are fully integrated into everything we do. And in this context, as you said, of the climate crisis, of global burning, it's so important that the rights of girls and women, particularly to their bodily autonomy and integrity, are maintained. Without that, as Natalia said in the video, and as I've heard her say many times in person, those that contribute the least and suffer the most, those disparities will continue. So I will not take up any more time and invite, okay, this is supposed to be a fireside chat, but we're trying to be carbon neutral, so there's going to be no fireside chat. because, you know, virtual or pretend or not, fireside is not good. So we're going to have a rather formal panel, but we'll try to keep the conversation slightly informal in the spirit of a fireside chat. So in that, can I invite my very distinguished first panel with the honorable ministers? Minister, could you please come up? Are the other ones? Please. Thank you for that. Is oh, Professor Zeli, could you please? And Minister from Madagascar. And we have the youth reviewer. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I hadn't seen you before. Please. So thank you for this. And if I can say in true UN fashion, all protocols observed, and after that, if we can be a little bit more informal, if that's okay with everybody. Thank you so much. As we go through this, let me introduce, we have with us on that end His Excellency, the Minister of Public Health from Madagascar, Professor Zeli. Thank you so much. We have the Honorable Minister of Health from South Sudan, Minister Gauch. Am I pronouncing your name? Absolutely wrong, I'm sure.
It's okay. Yolanda Awilding Duarte.
Duarte. There you go. And I will allow you to completely brutalize my name also, which is also a difficult name to say, so it's absolutely fine. And of course, we have Isabel Gomez, who's the the youth reviewer from UNFPA, who did some of the joint reviews of the NDCs. So thank you, all three of you, for being here. And also, thank you so much for your work, particularly the ministers who both of you, Madagascar as well as Sudan, who've brought high-level delegations, despite all the different, things that are happening in your own countries where you're busy, which shows the real commitment to looking at the intersections between health and climate crisis, which is so important at this time. So, Professor Zeli, we'll start with you, and my first question is, Madagascar is one of the most vulnerable countries in the impact of climate crisis, and it's facing successive droughts, floods, cyclones, cycles of those. Why is it important? Why is it important to you that climate change, the effects of climate change on health and well-being of girls and women? What is happening in Madagascar? If you could illuminate on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for your question. As you know, Madagascar is one of the countries that are the most affected by the climate change due to its geographical position. Climate change is a significant threat to the country's environment and people, and climate change has raised temperatures, made the dry season longer, and has resulted in more intense tropical storms. The country's unique ecosystems, animal and plant life are being impacted, and its vulnerability index is 0.561, placing Madagascar at rank 162nd out of 182 countries, reflecting its high vulnerability. And its Notre Dame Global Adaptation Initiative and the Gain Index is 35.3, thereby placing Madagascar 167th out of 182 countries. In addition to the ecosystems, animal and plant life, climate change poses an increasing threat to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The climate change effects are unfortunately part of our daily events. The severity of drought in the south part of the island and floods due to cyclones are increasing year by year. Since 222, Madagascar has been struck by 9 tropical storms, followed by floods, which affected approximately 250,000 people. And almost 5,000 of whom were pregnant women. Climate change affects the health and the well-being of women and girls in Madagascar. The main impacts include, among the major previous programs of the Ministry of Health, we aimed to decrease the stillbirth rate and maternal mortality rate, but climate change impacted directly or indirectly on the current situation. An increase of 1 degree Celsius in the week before delivery corresponds to with a 6% greater likelihood of stillbirth. An increased poverty driven by climate-related loss of livelihoods will also indirectly impact maternal mortality. Climate-related emergencies cause major disruption in access to health care, risk of malnutrition as women and adolescent mothers sacrifice their meal to meet the nutritional needs of their children owing the food insecurity. About gender-based violence and harmful practices, climate-related loss or change of livelihoods, as well as displacement and migration, increase the risk of gender-based violence and harmful practices. It was shown that these facts increase sexual abuse among young girls and young women. Moreover, due to poverty and their situation, parents tend to encourage their children, especially young girls, to get married as soon as possible. Therefore, these girls and women are not sufficiently educated. School dropout can be both cause and consequence of migration. Climate change and usual gender-blind climate change interventions worsen gender inequality, and drought in southern Madagascar has led to an increase in the rate of violence against women from 16 to 47%, while intensifying migration patterns with women migrants at risk of increased gender-based violence, human trafficking, and other forms of discrimination also. About the poverty and vulnerability, the social impact of the drought in exposed regions, especially in the south part of Madagascar, is exacerbating the poverty and the vulnerability of people in the region, with World Bank data suggesting that the region will only recover when the social impacts of climate change are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So clearly there's a huge impact and the vulnerability is there. Moving to you, Minister, South Sudan is also one of the, I think, top 10 countries that are vulnerable. Just before coming to this panel, I looked up which are the countries that are suffering the most from the climate crisis, and Madagascar, South Sudan, and the country I come from, which is Pakistan, consistently all three ranked in the top 5, no matter which index you were looking at. So given that, it's also very interesting that South Sudan is also committed, one of the countries with the strongest integration of sexual reproductive health and rights into its NDCs. Why has this, can you reflect on why this has been so important and how you've come about integrating SRHR into your NDCs so strongly, and what can we learn from that?
I would like, first of all, to say thank you so much to the organizers and to the host country and to all of you for making it here to this very beautiful city. I hope you are having fun. And also, besides walking a lot, so you don't need to go to gym. And thank you so much for moderating this section. South Sudan is one of the youngest countries in the world, if not in Africa. And we inherited a very fragile healthcare system that was by design made that way not to be strengthened. So by the time that South Sudan became independent in 2011, my nation inherited something that was similar to a primary healthcare system in one county, not in a province. Having said that, it means that we have to work around what we can to make sure the modalities that we have are actually hitting the SDG goals. So that is localization, sustainability, and resiliency. How do we do it? COVID taught us that if things are done in silos and if systems are not actually strengthened, that means that when the pandemic hits again, you are left on your own. So with that in mind, we try to change the shift. So, and by changing the shift, that means that we made a model of one-stop center, whereby if a woman goes to a clinic, she finds everything. We try to make it that way. So the reason why we try to make sure that the sexual and reproductive health and rights, especially maternal and gender-based violence in South Sudan, are like in the national strategic plan, are actually aligned. We have a few reasons. And some of those indexes are the indexes that you are able to Google up and find that my country and yours are grouped together. Some of these things leads to high. South Sudan has got one of the highest mortality and child mortality rate in the country, if not in the fragile state of the member states. And then also we have got linkages. We have got a very devastating linkages between climate change and health. And then we have got another point of young girls and women are experiencing high rate of GBV exacerbated by conflict and displacement. And why is this? It is because people are trying to fight over the scarce resources we have. The country is impacted in two ways. I have got one part that is experiencing extreme drought. I have got another part that is experiencing extreme floods. So that means that the individual in these two communities, people are forced to actually move for long distances to try and go find resources like water, like firewood, like planting and all this kind of thing. So in the process, women and young girls and also boys are actually exposed to abuses. It could be physical abuse, it could be sexual abuse, and they also lose their life along the way. Another reason is climate impact is actually health crisis at the same time. And it's also empowered, it is destabilizing the agenda of empowerment of women and girls. Because instead of these women and girls focusing on something that to advance themselves, they are spending a lot of time looking for basic necessities. So, and then going to another portion of it, how is Ministry of Health trying to actually mitigate this? But what we did beginning of the year, I launched what we call One Health approach, and I'm very sure if you are in the health field, you already know this, modality. It is whereby we try to bring everybody on the same table and try to use multi-sectoral approach. So when we use my multi-sectoral approach, we are focusing more on making sure everything is matched together. Because when I came on board to be the Minister of Health about 2 years ago, close to 2 years ago, transitioning from the parliament, I felt that I was running 60 ministries of health in the country. Because I have the partners, I have the donors, I have got the line ministries, everybody was trying to do their own thing. And imagine running a house, I'm a mother of 4. All my 4 kids trying to cook at the same time and we try to eat it. It is chaos. So by this question you have asked here is the main thing that actually led me to make sure that everything is merged together so that everything is almost under one roof.
Wonderful. Thank you for that one. Amazing experiences. So going from one of the youngest countries, I believe it is the youngest country in the world, to our youth perspective, Isabel, can you were one of the youth reviewers that looked at the review of the NDCs with UNFPA. Can you share some of your findings and your experience from that? Give me 2 or 3 of the key things that you would want everybody here and the ministers, because you have them here as an audience, to know.
Pues muchas gracias por la invitación y creo que el que estemos aquí, personas jóvenes, habla del gran trabajo que está realizando el Fondo de Población de Naciones Unidas al integrarnos en todo el ciclo de políticas y toma de decisión. Entonces, en la evaluación de las NDC que revisamos, voy a hablar específicamente de mi región, pude observar que los gobiernos reconocen la necesidad de evaluar la vulnerabilidad de las personas a los efectos derivados del cambio climático y han integrado el enfoque de género de forma transversal en las estrategias, considerando que es importante visibilizar los obstáculos y desafíos emergentes durante este proceso. Sin embargo, no se encuentran mecanismos claros de cómo van a integrar esa perspectiva en todas las medidas de adaptación y mitigación. Si bien las NDC no se mencionan componentes directos de los derechos de la salud sexual y reproductiva, sí se reconoce que los efectos adversos del cambio climático ponen en riesgo el goce de otros derechos como la salud humana. En ese sentido, se identifica la salud como eje prioritario para la adaptación. Desglosando un poco más, para los países es importante y urgente mejorar la capacidad de respuesta de los sistemas de salud, lo que aquí abre una posibilidad para garantizar que los servicios sean más móviles, que los suministros estén ubicados previamente y que exista el personal adecuado y capacitado para atender a las comunidades más vulnerables en contextos de emergencia, y eso ya lo hemos vivido en muchos países durante los últimos años. También es importante generar información y campañas de concientización en materia de cambio climático y la relación que guarda con la salud. En ese sentido, necesitamos recopilar más y mejores datos sobre cómo la emergencia climática está afectando los derechos de la salud sexual y reproductiva. Necesitamos tener datos desagregados por género. Eso nos va a permitir reconocer de manera más sencilla los vínculos que existen. Respecto a la participación juvenil en las NDC, pudimos observar que los gobiernos reconocen nuestro liderazgo y para ellos es importante mejorar los mecanismos y canales de coordinación con nosotros para los procesos de implementación. Sin embargo, las preocupaciones y recomendaciones de las juventudes para las NDC no se ven reflejadas en estos documentos. Además, no se expresa de manera clara cuáles serán las líneas de acción que seguirán los gobiernos para garantizar nuestra participación en la implementación de las NDCs. Necesitamos estar ahí y necesitamos una estrategia muy clara. Entonces, ¿cómo las juventudes podemos ayudar al avance de esta agenda y que se logre la integración de los componentes de los derechos de la salud sexual y reproductiva? Bueno, es necesario primero que se reconozca a la juventud como sujeta de derechos y agente de transformación, y eso lo refleja hoy aquí el Sistema de Naciones Unidas, al habernos integrado en la evaluación del informe y al de permitirnos hablar sobre lo que encontramos en ese informe y con ellos construir una estrategia. Eso lo necesitamos también de los gobiernos, no más consultas hemos tenido muchos, aplaudirles sus logros, también lo hemos hecho durante años, estamos liderando el cambio y la transformación en los territorios, tenemos la información, necesitamos estar ahí. Entonces, necesitamos fortalecer la coordinación institucional para que se garantice nuestra participación plena y efectiva durante todo el ciclo de actualización y de implementación de las NDC. Necesitamos integrar las demandas de los jóvenes desde el nivel base, no solo como buscadores de información, sino como expertos. Y movilizar fondos para potenciar los esfuerzos que las juventudes ya están realizando a nivel territorial para entender cómo los efectos del cambio climático están vulnerando el derecho a la salud sexual y reproductiva. Trabajo tenemos las juventudes, información tenemos las juventudes, entonces siéntenos con ustedes, como ahora en este panel que me parece súper enriquecedor, es horizontal. Y eso necesitamos en nuestros gobiernos, necesitamos que en este proceso de actualización que van a tener, estemos incluidos en la mesa, en el diseño y principalmente en la ejecución de todo lo que se vaya a realizar.
So, Isabel, thank you for that, and thank you so much for the work that you did in doing the reviews. Now that you have these two ministers sitting right here, captive audience, what is your one question to them that you can pose and then they're going to answer now, after this in this round? Remember, Madagascar has not yet made any commitments of SRHR in their NDCs, but the next round is coming up. Sudan has made some great... South Sudan, I'm so sorry. South Sudan has made some great commitments, but maybe there is some follow-up in terms of implementation. What would your questions to them be?
Wow. Wow, qué fuerte. No, pero qué gran oportunidad, ¿no? Justo esto. No que les preguntaría, sino que entremos en un... Ay,
He's not
okay.
sure what the question's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
There we go.
Ok, más allá de una pregunta, y lo digo genuinamente, yo nací con el programa de acción del Cairo. Básicamente a mis padres se les prometió un mejor futuro para mí. El Cairo cumple 30 años y yo estoy aquí sentada con todos ustedes abogando porque el programa del Cairo nos cumpla eso a mi generación y a las generaciones que vienen. Entonces, imagínense el reto que tenemos. La pregunta sería, ¿cómo hacemos de verdad para garantizar que las buenas prácticas que tenemos en los gobiernos, que ya logramos empujar las juventudes para tener nuestros derechos, no tengan un retroceso cada cambio de gabinete? Porque cada cambio de gabinete volvemos a pelear lo mismo y volvemos 3 pasos atrás y otra vez tenemos que sentarnos a la mesa. ¿Cómo hacemos desde sus posiciones para lograr garantizar que los derechos pues permanezcan y para que no vuelvan a suceder cosas como estas? En el 2015, con el Acuerdo de París, le volvimos a prometer un mundo mejor a las generaciones futuras. Yo no quiero enterarme que en 2050 la persona que nació en 2015 está sentada aquí a la mesa debatiendo otra vez estos temas, ¿no? ¿Cómo hacemos para cambiar eso? Porque sí
So I'm going to cut you off here, because you've asked them a really difficult question, and let me summarize it. Professor Zelli, what Isabel is asking, and of course, Minister, is how do you make sure that her generation doesn't lose, or she feels her generation is losing the rights that they acquired 30 years ago, and she doesn't want someone who's born today or born 15 years ago to suddenly have to be sitting here in 15, 20 years asking for the very same rights again. How would you ensure that? I'll let either of you go first.
Je vais répondre en français pour cette question-là. En fait, pour notre pays, certains droits fondamentaux des femmes sont inscrits dans la loi. C'était une succession de batailles que les administrations et les responsables de l'administration ont faites, mais actuellement, certains droits fondamentaux, notamment des femmes et des enfants, sont inscrits dans la loi malgache. Généralement, c'est plus difficile de changer une loi. S'il s'agit de décrets ou d'arrêtés ministériels ou de décisions, c'est plus facile, mais à partir du moment où c'est inscrit dans la loi, ça fait partie des droits fondamentaux. J'espère que dans votre pays, vous aurez également les mêmes avancées. Mais dans tous les cas, on a même la structuration du ministère, en fait, répond à des besoins qui sont inscrits dans le Code de la santé de Madagascar, parmi lesquels se trouvent les besoins fondamentaux dont vous avez cité tout à l'heure, les besoins spécifiques des jeunes. Comme j'ai dit, en fait, pour nous, et je trouve que c'est un des moyens les plus efficaces, c'est d'inscrire ces droits dans la loi. À partir du moment où vous changez quelque chose, en fait, il faut rendre le plus difficile possible la possibilité de changer ces lois, et comme ça, s'inscrit. Donc, en 2050, je ne sais pas combien de nous retrouverons encore ici, mais comme ça, en 2050, ce sera un droit acquis pour la génération future. Merci.
Thank you so much. Is this thing working? Okay.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much, my young sister. I will say that a few years ago, I actually asked the same statement in East African Regional Bloc at that time, because we come to these forums, we make beautiful declarations, we have got very beautiful documents, and those documents do not translate into actions. So for me, representing my country and also as a political leader in this position, I can actually say 2 things. First of all, we in this position push our governments, let me say my government in my country, to have got youth affirmative action. And youth affirmative action took me to parliament when I was in my 20s. And youth affirmative action took me to cabinet when I was in my 30s. I just turned 40 years 2 days ago. and have been I have been in this position of, let's say, power for close to a decade plus. It is because somebody, like the way now we are talking, their voices was heard, and somebody in the leadership made sure that like youth are included. At the level of a technical health sector, let me just call it that way, or maybe like the line ministries, we have got policies that are like youth friendly and also include youth. So, for example, all these declarations, the Paris Declaration in my country, and she knows very well, we work very, very closely with the UNFPA. We have got movements that are like mainly for youth. And when we are making, let's say, sending out like call for proposal, there's a portion that we actually dedicate to youth, you know, and right now it has become like a standard. It has become like a standard practice, whereby like in the health sector, I will not have got my team, and now I came here as the Minister of Health, and the gentleman there taking the video is part of the youth affirmative action. He's actually like below 25, you know, and have got more teams. So like the whole point I'm trying to make is this, you know, for your voices to be continue to be heard, we need two things: inclusivity and continuity. So like so that like we include the youth, and when these youth age out, we do not go back. We continue from where they left. I think I'll just drop in there because I know we're running out of time.
We are, and thank you. And this theme of making sure that for the next generation, their rights as well as their climate and the intersection between the two is preserved. So thank you on behalf of the girls and women in Madagascar and South Sudan. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much.
Stop.
These chairs are, don't let you move around too well. If we'll ask our next panel, Tara and Elena.
It is time we build climate-resilient health systems to protect the well-being of all. The global climate crisis is one of the most pressing problems we face. It disrupts development, multiplies people's vulnerabilities, and worsens gender inequality. When a climate disaster hits, livestock and crops are lost. Households and livelihoods are destroyed. Girls may be removed from school and put to work to alleviate their family's financial hardships. A girl out of school is at risk of being married off to a much older man, leaving her vulnerable to intimate partner violence and HIV due to an imbalance of power. Her education and aspirations are ended. Women and girls often lose the ability to manage their reproductive health. Health services like family planning are interrupted and unintended pregnancies rise. No menstrual products and lack of clean water may prevent them from menstruating with dignity. More women die without qualified birth attendants. To reduce shocks during disasters, we must protect the health and well-being of all. Climate adaptation measures need to include strengthening health services, especially sexual and reproductive health. National health plans must include strategies for adapting and building resilience. Better emergency preparedness, response, and recovery is needed to prevent gender-based violence, which frequently accompanies climate emergencies. UNFPA champions gender equality and prevents and responds to gender-based violence. We ensure continuity of services for sexual and reproductive health, including access to safe birth services. We urge governments to include health in their nationally determined contributions, especially sexual and reproductive health, and to secure the resources needed to build resilient communities. Greener and just nations position health, education, and gender in their climate change plans. The time to build forward better is now.
So thank you for that. So we just heard from the government perspective and from the review of the NDCs. So we're going to hear from our distinguished panel here. So we have online Ms. Mufakeng, who is the Special Rapporteur for the rights of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainment standards of physical and mental health, who's going to come with us online. We're just waiting for her to come on so we can talk to her. Tara Daniels, who's representing the SRHR and Climate Justice Coalition, a coalition of different civil society organizations that are advocating for SRHR and climate justice. As well as Elena Prats, who is the Technical Officer for Climate Change and Health at the WHO. So welcome, everybody. Thank you. And I will start with Ms. Mufakeng. So, Ms. Mufakeng, you were, or I've heard you refer to yourself as Dr. T. Can I just do that? Yes. We can't hear her, though. Okay, I can see her on my screen, but they can't see her on this screen. Can you put her up? And can we get some volume? Do we have that? I don't know who's... Okay, while they fix that, can you just hold on, Dr. T? I'm going to turn to Tara and ask her her question, and then I'll come back to you if you just hold on a little bit. So, Tara, you're working on convening women and gender activists, especially at the grassroots level, looking at the intersectionality of actions between gender, SRH, and the climate crisis. Can you talk a little bit about what do you think are some of the key opportunities that would really make a difference at COP28? Because this is the first time we have health really incorporated into it. What are the opportunities and what are we missing in this agenda? And what key messages would you like us to take? And then I'll take what you're saying to WHO and to Dr. T. All yours, Sarah.
We're a growing global coalition comprising both grassroots groups all the way up to international policy institutions, and some organizations' entry points are health, and some are gender, and some are climate, but we're all striving to work together on advocacy, research, or programming that is integrated as well as intersectional. So really appreciate this question and recognizing that at COP28, with health on the agenda, many of the opportunities are tied closely to the key messages. And first, as we recognize that this part of the fireside chat is about evidence as well as opportunities, we want to recognize the incredible quantitative and qualitative evidence that's been captured, including by diverse gender groups, and not only in peer-reviewed literature, but in grade literature by folks that are really driving that work on the ground. And we know that because of that, that rights are resilient and that ultimately investing in SRHR is a climate solution. So the opportunity here is using that existing evidence and those experiences of communities in co-designing and funding real gender-just climate solutions. And the way to do that in part is through more participatory approaches to policymaking and implementation. So on a recent coalition call, we had a member say that they felt that national adaptation plans and NDCs might just be documents for national libraries. And I think that's a valid concern and critique. And so NDCs not only have to be developed, and this next round of NDCs must be developed in more inclusive ways that really center community needs and priorities in ways that we've seen needs assessments done with regard to climate finance, but that they then must be held accountable to be actionable documents. And one of the ways that we do that is through the provision of climate finance by developed countries to ensure that conditional NDC commitments that are being made can be met. And then as we consider this opportunity for NDCs that could become a reality, we also have to consider NAPs, or National Adaptation Plans. And as noted in the opening remarks, Women Deliver, as well as the NAP Global Network, have done some really excellent work in surveying NAPs to find out how and if SRHR was being integrated. And so while health is recognized as a priority sector for adaptation, the attention to SRHR within that was limited. And so looking at the NAPs that have been submitted through the end of November, only 58% make reference to one or more aspects of SRHR, which we know is incredibly comprehensive and multifaceted. Though it is important to keep in mind that national adaptation should be an iterative process, but we also want to recognize the ways that adaptation is showing up on the agenda here, particularly around the global goal for adaptation and the need for real meaningful indicators in that process. So we have both thematic opportunities here, noting this increasing attention to health within the UNFCCC, as well as the continued support for gender, because we're coming up on the last year of the current Gender Action Plan. But we also have some operational opportunities. So for the former, we have to ensure that these discussions of health include the recognition that sexual and reproductive health services are a necessary part of healthcare, and that comprehensive SRHR is a human right and essential to a just, healthy, and resilient society. That's one of our key messages. Secondly, we know that we cannot achieve gender equality, this commitment to gender, without the full realization of SRHR. And so as we look at NDCs and NAPs and other UNFCCC-related activities, such as those under the current UNFCCC gap, and we look at those professing to be gender responsive, we know that the full implementation of those gender responsive activities has to include SRHR.
Aldo. Okay, thank you. And as a member of the coalition, thank you on behalf of all the other civil society organizations that take part in this. Shifting gears slightly, Dr. T, as a special rapporteur, you were, in 2022, you were one of the UN independent experts that really signed a declaration highlighting, and clarifying to the world for the first time that human rights are threatened and violated by climate impacts. Can you talk a little bit about what do you think has changed since then? Have things got better, or have they got worse, or what are the impacts that you're seeing?
Thanks for this opportunity. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you. I think it was important at that time to really the issues of climate change and climate crisis with them, because we know that the climate disaster, cultural, political, civil, and social rights, and the natural impact of that, of course, health infrastructure is being destroyed.
I think we're having a little bit of a sound problem here. So if you can, and I apologize again for asking you to just hold, while they technically try to fix your sound, if I can move to the other panelists, and then we'll come back. We'll come back to you, and I'll ask you both of your questions all at once, if that's okay. Again, our sincere apologies, but the sound in the room is not working very well. So Elena, sorry, jumping to you now. Congratulations, first health day at COP. Tell us all about it. Why and why? What's the importance of bringing SRHR into the health debate?
So, as you probably know, today is a very important day for the health community. WHO has been working on the interlinkages between climate change and health for over 30 years. And we've been basically fighting and raising our voice in the negotiations, just trying to explain at the beginning even why we were here. So the questions that we were getting is, what is WHO doing here? This is not about health. This is just an environmental issue that needs to be dealt by the experts on environment. So basically, coming here today and seeing all this commitment, as you know, we have almost 50 ministers of health today here, and a total of 123 ministries of health have endorsed the Climate Change and Health Declaration. Over 40 million health professionals have signed the call for action on climate change and health. And basically for us it's just wow.
Yeah.
So I think that...
Congratulations on that.
Is thanks to all of you and thanks to all the people, the organizations, the countries that are raising their voices and basically voicing which are the priorities. Of course, I think that I would endorse the comments by His Excellency, the Minister of Health, South Sudan, because probably now is the real moment to act. There are lots of plans. We already know what needs to happen. You already know what needs to happen to also make sure that sexual and reproductive health and rights are promoting within the climate change and health and within the climate change agenda. But basically now the responsibility on all of us is to make sure that this happens at country level. So just to give a little bit of a positive note, I would say that in terms of evidence gaps, of course, there is a lot that needs to be gathered, no? All of our actions have to be evidence-based, but we already know enough. So I would like also to commend the work conducted in Madagascar. Je voudrais vous féliciter aussi pour les rapports que vous avez développés pour comprendre les impacts de la santé liés au changement climatique. Et je voudrais vous dire qu'un des meilleurs rapports que j'ai vus, c'est celui-là fait par les Madagascar. Parce que vous avez regardé aussi quels sont les besoins spécifiques, par exemple, des femmes et des groupes de la population vulnérables au changement climatique. Et je voudrais simplement vous féliciter. So I was just mentioning that in terms of evidence, I would like to comment also the work conducted in Madagascar, because in terms of assessing climate change and health vulnerability, they were one of the early countries mixing both quantitative and qualitative approaches, and they made sure that the needs and the perception by specific groups, in this case women, were really taken into consideration and documented. They were listening to women just to understand the impacts. So this is something that I would like to commend. I also would like to commend UNFPA, because I think this is a very important initiative. I know you've been working in this area for a long time. And I think just building on the experience that we gain supporting countries, conducting the climate change and health vulnerability and adaptation assessments, and developing plans to address those, something that is very important is to go, of course, comprehensive. We need to understand the whole health system. We need to understand the functions that need to be strengthened. But we also need to improve in the specificity of the interventions that we are delivering. And this is something that we are in charge of capacity building and country support on climate change and health globally. So basically, this is something that we are seeing. We need to go deeper into the specific vulnerabilities and the specific needs on the interventions that need to be targeted to those phases that we want to protect. So this is...
And what would success look like for you? And as you're going into this ministerial, and of course, many of us, I'm sure, were there yesterday at the big plenary with the fantastic wraparound screen and the big commitments that were being made. But at the end of the day, for girls and women who are suffering the most from the climate crisis, particularly with their bodily autonomy and integrity, in this first ministerial, what would your hopes be for it?
Many. No, I think the most important now is to make sure that really we move to action. And this is linked to access to finance also. So basically, we need to make sure that the financial resources that are going to be required to go to this specificity, and not only looking at women and girls as victims, no, and as the most exposed, is really understanding how they are exposed because of different gender norms, roles, relationships, and basically tackling this increased vulnerability, but building on their own capacity to be actors of change. And this is true both for adaptation, but also for mitigation. So I think we all know all these countries that have developed plans that are just sitting in shelves waiting for funding to be implemented.
Yeah.
And I think the real game changer now is going to support those countries to move to action.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I did hear, I really applaud you bringing in finance, because so far that hasn't been brought in, I think, enough. At the end of the day, we can't address the health needs of girls and women without the money to back it, and also really appreciate your comment about making sure that they're not seen just as victims, but also as agents of change and at the decision table. On that note, if we have the Special Rapporteur on again.
I'm going to do without video. Hopefully the audio works.
Okay, I think we can hear you now.
All right, thank you.
Okay, because we've gone back and forth with you so many times, and Dr. Tina, I know you can be a very inspirational speaker, so I'm just going to ask you, you've got 5 minutes. Tell us what you think about making sure that girls' and women's bodily autonomy and integrity and the highest attainments of health within this climate crisis can be attained. What's your message?
Thank you. I think I just want to, of course, locate it in of women are about human rights, as well as social rights. You know,
okay, I'm really sorry, but it's just really not working on the room. I don't know if it's working online, but thank you so much for that. We'll just wrap up here on this panel on the evidence and gaps and move on to the next one. So very, very sorry for that, Special Rapporteur. I hope we have a chance to hear from you at some other point. Thank you, panel, for your contributions. And last but not least, could we have the third panel come on up to have your pseudo fireside chat? Flavia, please. And Aaron. Thank you, please. Whoops, are you okay? Still there, still there. So thanks. So we've looked at the government perspective. We've looked at the evidence and gaps and partnerships and opportunities. And here we're bringing in the thing that we closed on at the last one, which is financing. Funding and partnerships, both are very, very important and needed. So we have with us the distinguished panel. We have Erin Tanse, the Director of Sustainable Inclusive Economies from IDRC. We have Her Excellency Marta Delgado, many different roles, etc. Former roles, but still powerful, bringing in the voice of the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as the Environment Ministry from those perspective. And of course, we also have Flavia, who holds, again, many different things, including the Vice Chair of Foundation Botnar, the Co-Chair of the Lancet Commission on Gender-Based Violence, and the chair, and she before this panel, she said, emphasize this because this is the role, this is the hat she's going to wear as she speaks. She's also the chair of the Governance and Ethics Committee at PMNCH. So welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. So starting with you, Erin. IDRC has obviously played a very impressive role in advancing the research. It's been doing research on this topic for a lot of years. Can you talk a little bit about what is the existing and emergence evidence that's looking at the impact of the climate crisis on girls and women, and what are you seeing as the intersection between SRHR?
Sure, thank you. And I've been listening to the other panelists, so I feel as though much of what I'm about to say you will have now heard a few times, but that's fine. We like to repeat our messages. You
have to repeat it 7 times. People haven't heard it yet.
There we go.
So the people at the back, they need to hear it more.
So, but before that, I mean, I just also really want to highlight the amazing achievement from WHO, and I'm sure many people in this room, for us being in this space where we're having a day at COP, and the UAE's leadership made it happen. So I think that is an absolute step in the right direction. And 30 years is a long time, but better late than never. And for those of you that don't know IDRC, so we're a Canadian Crown Corporation, and we're basically a research granting council in a way, and we fund research in developing countries. We give money mainly to experts and researchers in the academic community in developing countries, and then try and work together to raise Southern voices around the priorities of those countries. We have a global health team and I'm actually just representing our global health team because of the greenhouse gas emissions. We decided we would keep our delegation small. So I'm speaking on behalf of Montasser Kamal, who's the director of our global health program based in Ottawa. But our strategy at IDRC, which is a 10-year strategy, is really dedicated to reducing inequalities, reducing climate change, and therefore SRHR and strengthening equitable health systems are key and core to our strategy, which takes us to 2030. What have we found in this space? Similar to what others have said. We've obviously observed that climate-related emergencies cause major disruptions in health and protection of women and girls, and have resulted in so many negative impacts of access to and quality of sexual and reproductive health services. The climate crisis also has a wide range of impacts that harm maternal health, and either by aggravating existing factors or hindering access to life-saving services. Some other consequences, like I've mentioned, I'll go quickly, just reduced or increased risk of maternal mortality and morbidity, an increased risk of GBV, sexual exploitation, forced marriage. I'll tell you just an anecdote from my own, the work that I do that focuses more on finance and economies. We've got a work on the losses and damages of climate change and what that means. And you probably have heard that there's a loss and damage fund now that was mentioned or that was agreed to last year in Sharm el-Sheikh. And in listening to some of the stories from that project, for instance, in Bangladesh, they have very, very serious impacts of climate change of all kinds and sorts. One of them is rising sea levels. So that's that slow onset. But what does that mean ultimately? This is the story that I listened to, which is high sea level rise causes salination in the waters, in the rivers, etc. And so communities along those rivers obviously ingest and drink that water. And that increased salinity has a deep impact on skin, and it can cause skin blotching and irritation. And what is one of the consequences of that in these particular communities in Bangladesh? Higher increase of child marriage, because families want to ensure that their children are married off before their girls get the patches and makes them, I would assume, undesirable. I mean, really, this is seriously these are the impacts of climate change. They are so real and being lived already, day after day. And the other thing I'll just say is that I know that some of the work that's been done on analyzing the NDCs, which has been fantastic, and we've got the opportunity now as the NDCs are going to sort of go through the next round. Some of them do recognize that women and girls are more impacted or differently impacted. And some of them, like even Somalia, for instance, recognizes that that women and girls have a lack of access to and control over critical resources. Obviously, they have unequal labor division, and the care economy is for another time. They are absent from the decision-making process, from even at the household level, often, all the way up to the national level. And so, for me, that's just one thing that I would highlight beyond what all the other panelists have said, is to achieve gender equality, we have to deal with the power imbalances in our homes, in our communities, and in our governments and in our democracies. It's a huge structural challenges that we have. But as the Secretary General said, gender equality is not the problem, gender equality is the solution. So that is sort of what I'll say.
On
back to you.
that drop mic moment, we'll just move to the next one, because really beyond that, you can't really say that much. Ms. Delgado, Mexico has been a champion and been doing so much, and I think a lot of countries can look to it as a source of inspiration. But what best practices can we learn from, in terms of integrating SRHR and looking at the nexus between the climate crisis?
Thank you. Allow me to say that the intersectionality has been a matter that since the WHO, they included in their congresses the climate change perspective, and now we have in reverse sense including the day in the climate change conference. So what we need to do is to see all the social and environmental problems in an integrated way. So this for us allows us to really reflect on how to, in this case, finance, but also organize public policies and diplomacy around these very important matters. Thus, Mexico is a country that always has been supporting the gender agenda across the whole international and multilateral level. And in the specific case of the Montevideo consensus, the importance of this consensus in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean is very high, because we are facing very different challenges around the world. The diagnosis of the inequity that women and girls are facing around the world is very similar. But the solutions are not similar. The solutions must rely on identifying specificities in the situation of each group of population. Mexico, we have reported clear efforts to improve the condition of girls, boys, adolescents, and young people, as well as in the case of adults. However, the changes are not coming in the path and in the space that we need. Many examples actually made in my country, but I would like to mention two of that, significantly improving as much information that we have released on this conference. The initiative, for example, of the feminist foreign policy, Mexico decided 5 years ago to adopt a feminist foreign policy.
Excellent.
And that means that through all the different diplomatic approaches, we need to take into account the sexual and reproductive rights, of course, but as human rights. And then other actions include, for example, the services that we are providing as a country to Mexican population abroad. Second, we have also organized a migration policy from the human rights perspective. And this has to do with sexual and reproductive rights for women and girls. Why? Because we are receiving in Mexico a lot of women migrating through the United States from other South countries in Latin America. And unfortunately, this process of migration has different reasons, economic reasons, but also climate reasons. In the central part of the Caribbean and Central America, we have this dry corridor where a lot of people are losing the crops, are losing the way of living, and then they want to go out of the country and come maybe to the United States, but they stayed in Mexico. So even for those populations that are coming to Mexico as migrants, we need as a country to provide health services and orientation and all the means that women and girls need, for example, to overcome the migrant situation in disadvantage. If you take this approach of human rights, women are in a vulnerable situation when they are migrating. So I just presented 2 or 3 examples on the diagnostic of the problem. But maybe in this conference we need also to understand that there are a lot of diagnoses now. We understand and we know the problems in better way, but not how to solve these problems in the future, because the problems are growing up very quickly. I am going to stop here, but I would be very happy to follow on this discussion.
Thank you. And your point that we all know the problems and know the problems very well, but how do we move to having a discussion and a commitment around the solutions is very well taken. So in order to have an ability to address some of the solutions, of course, we have to look at mitigation and adaptation. And we have to look at mitigation and adaptation financing. And we know that very little of that financing, first of all, there's not enough financing going into that. What is going in terms of climate financing, only 0.5% is going to health systems and looking at those. So, Flavia, from your point of view, how do we change this?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. Before I answer that question, I want to make a reflection on the comment that you made as a young speaker before, and connecting to what Elena also said. I'm extremely happy that today there is, for the first time at the COP, there is a health day. Why? I was part of that journey that Elena described in my previous role as Assistant Director General at WHO. We fought very hard for the inclusion in the Paris Agreement of the right to health. If you read that, you will see that's there. And then almost 10 years after, now we have the Health Day. So don't ever believe that what you fight for will disappear. Believe that it continues, is part of a journey, and keep the hope up, okay? So coming to your question, Malika, it's really, I think, in the phase where we are in, right now, we really, in that intersection of climate change and health, and the special sexual and reproductive health, we really need to be now at the point where we look at the follow the money and follow the financing. Because as you mentioned already what I wanted to say, but less than 5% of the total global climate adaptation goes to health. So there is that huge pot that all of you are hearing and is being enlarged. Even as you mentioned now, the loss and damage fund that are being created, the climate adaptation fund, the green climate fund, the huge amount that now the multilateral development bank together are putting. A fraction of this is going to health. And even less of a fraction, we don't even know exactly how much goes to sexual and reproductive health. So our next steps has to be follow that money and make sure that the governments that are investing in it have the capacity to interact in that interface. Because with the partnership, what we have done is we have asked the countries, and we have heard consistently, they do not have the capacity to articulate the value of investing in health within the climate change discussion. We need to look at that interface. Let me stop there because...
Well, thank you. And I'll follow up with you in just a minute, but I wanted to go back to Erin. Erin, we heard from the ministers, we heard from our youth reviewer, and we heard from many others that this renewal of the NDCs that's coming up is going to be a very critical moment, because that's where governments and parties make commitments. What are the keys? And people keep saying that there's a lack of evidence, although can I just put that actually there's more than enough evidence? There's just a lack of hearing.
Plus, yeah.
Yeah, the 30, so much evidence, but given that we keep hearing there's a lack of evidence or context-specific evidence, what can a research organization do, or what evidence needs to be put in which ways for these ministries and these governments to be able to hear it, so that, again, our civil society and our youth can pressure the governments into making the types of commitments that are needed in order for us to really deal with this issue?
Yes, I could talk for hours, but I will just
you
say
have
that
3 minutes.
3 minutes. That so we believe that evidence, which yes, there is a lot, that evidence. I think what we have done is help to support the building of that evidence, the high quality evidence, and by doing so, building the capacity of the academic ecosystem in countries, wherever around the world, so that they can go very confidently with that evidence to ministers, to decision makers, and say, this is what we've done, this is high quality research, here it is, here are the facts. And we also know that, of course, a big part of the answer is local and localized support to meaningfully integrate SRHR and gender transformative approaches into the NDCs. But who are the people that are doing the NDC negotiating and writing, right? We need to make sure that the experts, right, that have that knowledge are there at the table, advocating with the data, with the facts. And we will continue, I think IDRC will continue to work with those experts who are speaking hopefully from their local communities, right? And bringing those out. So we also have to ensure that the NDCs are financed, adequately financed, and we know the difficulty with that. Even just bureaucratically trying to access climate finance, if you are, even trying to get adaptation money, it's a mess. It is a mess, and it's these siloed approaches that make no darn sense. They make no sense. But we have to work with donors, big, governments, etc., to help them to see that keeping these silos is completely detrimental to us reaching the goals that we all, I think, want to achieve. Let me see. So I've got so many things to say, but
1 more minute.
1 more minute. I'm just going to summarize. We have to ensure that the voices of women and girls being affected by climate change are accessible to decision makers so that they make the right decisions. And we see our role as contributing to be to that evidence, as I said, supporting the generation of evidence in an inclusive manner and promoting the use of this evidence in decision making. And we do hope that this will make a difference in the long run.
Excellent, thank you. So if that's what's needed, if I can now turn to Martha, you, and say Mexico has SRHR and the NDCs, but not as robustly perhaps as you'd want to. If that's what's needed, how can we make sure, for instance, that Mexico in the next round really ups their game?
There are a couple of ways that a country can use for doing these kind of things. First is the multilateral activism. For example, our country has been supportive, was the one that really supported the Lima's action plan in the Conference of the Parties in Madrid. So at the multilateral arena, we have been struggling a lot for other countries to really include this perspective in not just in the NDC, but also organizing gender and climate action plans, domestically speaking. And Mexico, we have presented our last NDC last year in Sharm el-Sheikh. And it was really hard to increase the commitment, the target for reducing GHG emissions in the next 5 or 10 years. Having said that, the perspective of how to include human rights and gender and equity and sexual and reproductive rights in the NDC must be right now easier than in the past. Why? Because the hard thing was to increase the NDC, to increase our target. And now we have to apply that specific policies in our domestic NDC, and I think that the government will do in the next years a very good job. I want to end this participation just saying our young delegation, the youth representative, that we really need to change the way of these negotiations, language and actions. Why? I was a young participant in the COP5 24 years ago. I was selected for coming to Bonn as a young leader to speak to the adults what they need to do in the next 10 years, 20. But having attended all these conferences of the parties and being here, I think that the young participation is very important, and also the speech of women and girls in this conference are relevant. Why? Because in this conference of the parties, we have said everything. You have there all the knowledge, all the experience of the data, but you need to reorganize this information for behaving different. And I want you to take this stafeta, this role now, and go ahead, because not because we are tired, we are not, but we are stuck. And this conference is very good place to say that we are trusting also in you as young leaders.
Thank you for that. And thank you for passing on the baton, Jose. Stefeta, thank you. Flavia, 1.5 minutes, closing remarks from you. Bring in the youth and bring in the money.
Let me say one more thing that I didn't cover in the previous part. It's important, and you have said it, it's important we look at breaking down these silos, these ministerial silos. You alluded very much, you said that, people are eating under the same roof, but they cook at different times. And one of the ways that we have at is to look at financing mechanisms that are comprehensive and that are like, for example, adaptive social protection mechanisms that protect women and girls from the shocks, from the climate shock, from the drought shock, from the different weather extreme shocks, and also provide incentives for women, especially, to have access to health services, including the important services of sexual and reproductive health, to ensure their ability to decide when, if and when to become pregnant. So looking at those modalities of financing, I think, is a very important mechanism that we can approach from the country end, but also that we can at those discussions with the different modalities of financing, we can be vehicle and advocate for. Now, one last thing I'd like to say is that we need different of us, please, UNFPA, Julita, different actors to be accredited into the climate funding mechanism. When we looked first with Julia, our young colleague at the PMNCH, at the Green Climate Fund, it is incredible. WHO is not accredited. The only group that is accredited is Save the Children. And in fact, now they have several projects that are addressing health of girls. And that is one clear way to go. Get accredited and get part of the conversation. The final word is we need really partnerships. We cannot do that from our individual endpoint. We need to create fora like this one, like Women Deliver is great at doing, where we come together and our voice get amplified. And we at the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, we are willing to be part of it. We have a group that is working really on this intersection to raise the voices and to amplify the voices. I think I did it.
Yes, you did. Thank you. So I wanted to thank all our panelists, not only the ones who are on now, but the honorable ministers, all the people who spoke before from the coalition, as well as our youth delegates. And I just wanted to thank you. So a few of the words in just like the next 30 seconds, the critical things that I heard, and I think it's really, really important to take it forward. Starting with the message of, girls and women suffering the most in terms of the climate crisis, but contributing the least. And then we heard the comment that they're also actors in their own right and should be at every decision-making table. We also heard from various speakers saying not just at the household, but at every level, up to the national level. And we just heard actually now that not just the national level, but at the global spaces too, particularly the global spaces that need accreditation, that need voices at the ministerial delegations to change the way that some of these decision-making tables are put together so that we can invite more diverse voices into it, because without those diverse voices, we'll never be able to have the sort of integrated approaches, the commitments that are needed to push forward this incredibly important process to make sure that girls and women and sexually reproductive health and rights within the health sector and the impacts of the climate crisis on that are not forgotten. And I'll take Flavia's last words, which is follow the money. So let's make sure some of these billions and billions of dollars that we hear being committed every day not only come to health, but come to the health for girls and women too. So thank you ever so much for your time here.